So the K&N Series 77 cold air intake should be the intake you pick if you own an 09 to 13 5.3 liter powered Silverado or Sierra and you're looking for a very retro, old school, open element design to clean up the underhood appearance, but most importantly, you want to also improve your performance in terms of horsepower, torque, and throttle response. At around the $300 price point, this is actually one of the more affordable options, and that's awesome because it's still coming from one of the biggest names in the business. K&N's been around longer than I've been alive, and they have definitely proven time and again that their high flow filters and their intake systems in general do improve performance, especially in the low to mid range. That factory paper element does a good job for the daily commute, but let's face it, it is restrictive. It does get dirty quick, you can't clean it, and overall it will choke up your motor over time. That's not the case with the K&N system. They say that this filter is good for 100,000 miles, and if you live in one of these emission restrictive states like California, they don't like to have fun with car mods, but you do get away with the Series 77 because it is CARB certified, meaning it is 50 state legal as far as emissions are concerned. Now, as far as the install is concerned, it is also very simple. It is a bolt-on job. You do have to drill one small hole in the metal plate underneath the factory air box, but I promise it's something anybody can do at home with a basic hand drill. So for that reason, I'm still giving the install a simple 1 out of 3 wrenches on my difficulty meter. Shouldn't take you more than an hour or two getting the job done in the garage or the driveway. So again, you want one of the more affordable intakes available for the Silverado. You want it to come from one of the big names in the business. You want something that's going to clean up the underhood appearance, and you want to improve your performance. Go ahead and pull the trigger on the Series 77 and then come back and I'll show you guys what tools you need, and I'll walk you through that install step by step. All right, to install our intake, you'll need a standard drive ratchet, a 10mm wrench, and 8 and 10mm sockets. You'll also need a T15 Torx bit for your MAF sensor, and you'll need a 3mm and 5/32 Allen key, and lastly, you'll need a 5/8 drill bit or a step bit. Now, optional but helpful tools include a flathead screwdriver, a pair of snips, an extension, and a cordless impact. All right, so first we have to remove our factory intake. Pretty straightforward, a couple of hoses, clamps, and connections. Now to loosen the clamps that secure the factory intake system, you'll need an 8mm socket. It's also helpful to have an extension handy because some of those clamps are kind of tucked down in there. But first you need to remove your engine cover. It's just held on with a couple rubber grommets, so just gently pry up on it with your hands and pull it free. All right, now we have our intake tube freed up from our throttle body. We have to remove a couple of connections from the intake tube itself before we pull the entire thing from the engine bay. Specifically, you gotta pull your breather hose here from the plenum. That's this little ugly black plastic piece back here sitting above the valve cover. That's just held in with a little O-ring, so just pull on that gently to remove that. Then you gotta make sure that your main coolant line here is not secured to the intake tube. There's a little Christmas tree fitting right there. Again, it's just a plastic fitting, so just pull on that gently, or if you have a little pry tool or a flathead, that should do the trick. At any rate, once you got both those disconnected, go ahead and disconnect your MAF sensor. That's just a little clip right there, so press down gently and remove it like so. All right, last step is loosening the intake tube from the factory air cleaner. Again, one little band clamp right there next to the MAF sensor, so go ahead and use your 8mm socket to loosen him up, and you can pull these out as 2 pieces. All right, so we have our factory intake removed here. You guys can see a nice little comparison between our factory setup and our new K&N system, right? And obviously the big star of the show here is the Conical Filter. It's a lot better than the paper element filter that's hiding in here. That thing doesn't do well. It kind of restricts the motor, especially at low and mid-range RPM. So this is where you're gonna get that better throttle response. And you might pick up some horsepower and torque on the low and mid-end, like I just said. We're also ditching all this crazy, ugly, boxy, bulky stuff on our factory intake system. You got these plenums and reservoirs and all that stuff. We're ditching that. We're going with a really nice polished aluminum intake tube, very free-flowing. And because it's an open element design with that powder-coated heat shield, it just overall cleans things up under the hood. It makes it look a lot nicer. So before we start actually making things look good under the hood, we have to swap out our MAF sensor here. Our MAF sensor is secured with a couple of Torx head screws, so you'll need a Torx bit, specifically a T15 Torx bit. They do provide new hardware to secure the MAF sensor to the tube. You'll need a 3mm Allen key, and you'll need to use the provided Allen head bolts. All right, once you got the MAF sensor on your intake tube, you can discard your factory system, do with it what you will. Next, we're gonna install the weather stripping on our heat shield, and then we'll install the plastic coupler for our conical air filter. All right, once you got your weather stripping installed, go ahead and grab your plastic coupler for the conical filter. And you're gonna install this using the larger Allen head bolts provided in the kit. You also need one crush washer and one flat washer for each bolt. And to tighten these bolts down, you will need a 5/32 Allen key. All right, next we're going to install this support bracket on our heat shield. To do that, you'll need to grab the 10mm head bolt in the kit. That is the short bolt, by the way. There are two separate length bolts. You'll also need two flat washers, and you'll need one of those nylock nuts. Now, to tighten this stuff down, you'll need a 10mm wrench and a 10mm socket. All right, next we're going to install the rubber grommets that are meant to secure our heat shield to the bottom mounting plate for the factory air cleaner. Now we have to drill a hole in that factory plate for the other one, but we can install one of the two. So grab that rubber grommet, also grab one of the hex head bolts in the kit with one of those flat washers. Now to tighten this one down, you'll need a 1/2" socket. All right, so we got one of those two rubber grommets in place. Let's go ahead and get our heat shield situated. Then I'll show you guys where that other hole needs to be drilled, and I'll show you how to do it. All right, so we got our heat shield situated. You can see we got our one grommet already fit into one of those holes that's already drilled in the plate. We have to make a hole for our other grommet. So go ahead and grab a marker, mark your general location, and you'll need that 5/8 drill bit to get that hole drilled. All right, so we got our hole drilled, we got our second grommet installed there. We're gonna go ahead and throw our heat shield in place and get both of those grommets seated. All right, now that our heat shield's situated, we're gonna secure that little support bracket that we installed earlier. You're gonna need this 10mm head bolt with the large flat washers, one small flat washer, and one of those nylock nuts. Now you'll also need a 10mm socket, and you might need a 10mm wrench to tighten all this stuff down. Now when you go to throw this bolt in place, you want to throw the bolt through the fender, and you want to have both of those large flat washers on the outside. All right, our heat shield is finally done. Now we can start getting to the fun stuff. We can throw our air intake in place. We'll need that large band clamp here on the end. Make sure it sits flush all the way around. Tighten it down to that plastic coupler we installed earlier, and you'll need that 8mm socket that we were using the whole time. All right, next we can install the rubber couplers for the intake tube itself. This step-down coupler is gonna go on the throttle body. Obviously the large end goes on the throttle body and the small end goes to the intake tube. And this one that has the same side on both sides goes to the air filter. Now you'll need all the clamps that you can see here on either end, and you'll need that 8mm socket to tighten these down. All right, we're just about ready to install our intake tube, but before we do that, we have to remove our factory crankcase breather hose and install our new hose. So you want to rotate it so the hose is facing towards the throttle body, and you can see this little clip right here. Just grab a flathead screwdriver, pull on that clip, and then remove it like so. All right, now we can finally install our intake tube. Pretty straightforward. Throw the intake tube into the air filter side, that rubber coupler. That has enough flex in it that you can pull on everything to get this lined up with the throttle body. Once you got the intake tube in both rubber couplers, go ahead and tighten down those 8mm clamps, and then we're gonna reconnect our MAF sensor. We're gonna install our breather hose to our barbed fitting on here. Make sure you throw that in place if you didn't already, and then we'll be all wrapped up. All right, once you got that breather hose and your MAF sensor plugged in, that'll wrap up the install. And that also wraps up my review of the K&N Series 77 high performance cold air intake. Keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.